Battle of Trench, Peace Treaty and the Battle of Mautta. Two of the three Jewish tribes had already been expelled from Medina by the time of the Battle of Trench. In the beginning the Prophet had tried to maintain good relations with the Jews as they were the people of the book. However, the Jews were never sincere with the Muslims. They were always conspiring against the Muslims and helping their enemies in secret. They also committed blatant violations of the Charter of Medina, due to which the Muslims were forced to take action against them. Banu Qaynuqa were the first to be punished. They were exiled after the Battle of Badr, because they tried to dishonor a Muslim lady and killed a Muslim man who tried to rescue her. Most of the members of Banu Qaynuqa settled in Syria. The next Jewish tribe to be expelled was the tribe of Banu Nadhir. They were exiled after the Battle of Uhud, because they hatched a conspiracy to kill the Prophet. Muhammad was informed in time through revelation about their evil plans, and so he was able to take precautions. As a consequence, their fortresses in Medina were besieged and the Jews were exiled after surrender. After their exile from Medina, the Banu Nadhir settled in Khayber towards the north of Medina. Khayber was a very rich town inhabited by various Jewish tribes apart from Banu Nadhir. Khayber became a center of conspiracies against the Muslims. These conspiracies became the reason behind the Battle of Trench. About 20 Jewish leaders from Khayber visited the Quraysh and Banu Ghatfan tribes. Banu Ghatfan was a very large and strong desert tribe living in the Najd region of Arabia. The Jews convinced the two tribes to launch a united attack on Medina to get rid of the threat of the Muslims forever. The Jews were rich and hence they were able to offer bribes and weapons to persuade many other tribes also to fight the Muslims. Banu Ghatfan and Quraysh made a joint strategy to attack Medina with their allies. They, along with the Jews of Khayber, also established contacts with Banu Qurayza, the Jewish tribe which was still living in Medina. The leaders of Banu Qurayza agreed in secret to break their alliance with the Muslims and to help the attackers. The Banu Ghatfan marched on to Medina from the north and the Quraysh marched from the south. The combined force of both the tribes along with their allies rose to 10,000 strong. Both the tribes had agreed to combine their forces near the northern side of Medina. When Allah's messenger learnt about the huge approaching force of 10,000, he held a meeting with his close companions. Salman al-Farsi advised Muhammad to dig a trench to defend the city. Medina had a natural protection from three sides. It was protected by rocky tracts towards the east and the west, and the southern side was covered by dense orchards of date palm trees. The only direction from which an attack could be launched was the north. Therefore the Muslims made a plan to dig a wide and deep trench to cover the northern side of Medina. The Prophet himself participated in the digging of the trench. The Muslims fought extreme hunger to complete the task in time. The Prophet prepared an army of 3,000 and camped near a hill named Salah to wait for the enemy. The Muslims had left their women and children in small fortresses in the center of the city. At that time, they did not know that they had another enemy within the city of Medina not far away from the city center. The Banu Qurayza had secretly sent messages to the attackers promising them their full support. When the Quraysh and the Ghatfan arrived to join forces on the northern side, they were shocked to see a wide trench between themselves and the Muslims. The Arabs had never seen anything like it before. The attacking army was not prepared for this. They had earlier thought that they would quickly finish the Muslims with the help of Banu Qurayza and return to their homes. But now they were forced to stop right at the door of Medina. So reluctantly they had to camp and start a long siege. The trench was too wide to cross for the whole army. Some non-believers tried to jump over the trench with their horses, but they were killed by arrows shot by the Muslims. So the Battle of Trench was more a case of psychological warfare rather than armed conflict. It was a testing time for both the Muslims and the non-believers. Both the sides had to face extremely cold weather during the days of siege. The non-believers were getting impatient, as they did not have enough food and provisions to stay for a long siege. Their animals were dying because of the cold. The Quraysh finally sent a message to Banu Qurayza asking them to attack the houses of the Muslims. In this way the Muslims would be forced to leave the front to protect their houses, and the invading force would be able to cross the trench with little opposition. The Banu Qurayza also sent messages saying that they were ready to attack. The news about the treachery of the Jews quickly spread in the Muslim army, causing much panic and despair. The Muslims were worried about their women and children, who were staying in unguarded fortresses. The psychological pressure that the Muslims faced is mentioned in the Quran. Remember what you felt when they came upon you from above you and from below you, and when your eyes became dim, and your hearts came up to your throats, and when most conflicting thoughts about God passed through your minds. Surah Al-Ahzab 10. As the Jews were getting ready to attack the Muslims, the help from Allah came in quite an unexpected way. A man from Banu Ghatfan, named Nuaym ibn Mas'ud, had secretly become Muslim. He came to visit Allah's Messenger too in the dark of the night in secret, and told him about his secret conversion to Islam. Nuaym asked the Prophet if he could offer any help. Muhammad asked him to do something so that the non-believers and Banu Qurayza were not able to attack together. Being a member of Banu Ghatfan, Nuaym was on good terms with both the Quraysh and the Banu Qurayza. In the dark of the night he went first to the leaders of the Jews to talk to them as if he was a well-wisher. He told them that the Quraysh were in great trouble, and they were thinking about running away, and they won't be able to launch an attack. He said that the Quraysh only wanted the Banu Qurayza to fight the Muslims, and were themselves intent upon retreating. Nuaym asked the Jews to take precaution in fighting the Muslims, because if the Quraysh did not join them as promised, the Banu Qurayza would be left alone at the mercy of the Muslims. He advised them to ask the Quraysh to provide them with 10 of their leaders as an assurance and a sign of their commitment to the Jews. After convincing the Jews, Nuaym immediately went to meet the leaders of Quraysh. Nuaym told them that he had heard bad news about the Jews. The Jews, he said, were still loyal to the Muslims, and they were just deceiving the Quraysh by sending false messages of assurance. He also told them that he had heard from his friends in Banu Qurayza that the Jews were about to play a heinous trick with the Quraysh. The Jews were planning to demand 10 leaders of Quraysh as assurance, and were intent upon killing them and sending their heads to Muhammad to prove their loyalty to the Muslims. The Quraysh were shocked to hear this news. The next day they got the message of the Jews confirming what Nuaym had told them. The Jews were demanding 10 men of Quraysh to get assurance about the support of the Quraysh. The Quraysh refused to send their men to the Jews, accusing them of being on the side of the Muslims. The Jews also became more suspicious about the intent of the Quraysh. In this way, Nuaym was able to sow seeds of discontent between the two allies, and they were not able to attack the Muslims together. Both the Jews and the invading Arab tribes were in a state of confusion, as they did not know what step to take now. One night the weather turned extremely bad, and a violent storm struck the camp of Quraysh. The tents of the Arab tribes were uprooted by the gusty winds. The whole army was disheveled. The tribes finally lost hope and left in disarray. The Muslims did not know what was happening in the camp of the disbelievers. They were themselves trying to protect themselves from the cold wind. Next morning, when they woke up, they were astonished to see that the whole space covered by the non-believers was now empty. The enemy had left in defeat, failing to fulfill their mission. The battle was over, leaving 6 martyrs on the side of the Muslims and 10 killed from the invading Arab tribes. Muhammad told the Muslims that from that time onwards the Quraysh would never be able to attack the Muslims again. Rather, it would be the Muslims who would be attacking the Quraysh. The battle resulted in devastating consequences for the enemies of Islam. The non-believers were convinced that the Muslims were invincible, because they could not even be defeated by the combined assault of the Arab tribes. Immediately after the siege ended, the Prophet asked the Muslims to quickly march to the dwellings of Banu Qurayza. The Jews were to be punished for their treachery. The Muslims besieged the fortresses of Banu Qurayza. Banu Qurayza finally surrendered on the condition that their fate be decided by a member of the tribe of Aws. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, the leader of Aws, who was injured during the siege of the trench, and was taking his last breaths, was chosen by the Prophet to decide the punishment for the Jews. Sa'd announced his verdict saying that all the Jewish men be killed and their women and children taken as slaves. The punishment was likewise carried out by the Muslims. In the 6th year of migration, Allah's Messenger saw a dream, in which he saw himself performing tawaf of the Kaaba with the believers. Muhammad informed the companions about the dream and told them to prepare for a journey to Mecca to perform Umrah. By that time the Muslims had fought 3 blood-quenched battles against the Quraysh, and in those circumstances, it could prove to be an extremely dangerous journey for the Muslims. But still about 1,400 companions got ready to travel alongside the Prophet. Muhammad only wanted to perform tawaf in peace. Therefore he ordered the companions to put on the cloth of ihram and carry the animals of sacrifice. The Muslims were ordered to carry only the sheathed swords with them and leave all other weaponry. When the news of the journey of the Muslims reached Mecca, the leaders of Quraysh became furious and decided that they would not allow the Muslims to enter Mecca at any cost. They sent an army to fight the Muslims. Muhammad changed his course to avoid a clash with the army and made a detour to camp at Hudaybiyah, a place near Mecca. Hudaybiyah was included in the sacred territory where fighting was forbidden. In this way the people of Mecca were put in a difficult situation, where they could not fight their worst enemy in the sacred territory. Muhammad sent Usman ibn Affan for negotiations with the Quraysh. A rumor spread in the Muslims' camp that Usman had been married by the people of Mecca. The Prophet and the Muslims became so sad to hear the rumor that they decided to fight for the revenge of Usman till their last. The Prophet took an oath from the companions under a tree. All the companions pledged that they would fight till their last breath. The oath is known as Bay'at Rizwan. This oath is mentioned in the Quran. Allah was well pleased with the believers when they swore allegiance to you under the tree. He knew what was in their hearts, so he sent down tranquility upon them and he rewarded them with a speedy victory. Surah Al-Fath, 18. Soon afterwards it became clear that Usman was not martyred and was safe and sound. But due to the Bay'at Rizwan, the people of Mecca knew it with ever greater conviction that the Muslims were always ready to sacrifice their lives for their Prophet. The Quraysh understood that fighting the Muslims was not a viable option. They became more inclined to establishing peace with the Muslims. The Quraysh sent Suhail ibn Amr as a representative to negotiate a peace deal with Muhammad too. After some negotiations, an agreement was signed which came to be known as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The main terms of the treaty were: 1. The Muslims would not perform Umrah that year, but they could come the next year armed with only sheathed swords. The Muslims would be allowed to stay in Mecca for 3 days only. 2. There would be 10 years of peace between the Muslims and the Quraysh. 3. Arab tribes would be free to forge alliances with either the Muslims or the Quraysh, and in that case both the Muslims and the Quraysh would also maintain peace with each other's allies. 4. Muslim converts from Mecca would not be allowed to join the Muslims in Medina. However, apostates from Medina would be free to join the non-believers of Mecca. The terms of the treaty were apparently against the interests of the Muslims. The companions were very upset at the terms of the treaty. They were thinking that it was a treaty of surrender. However, Allah declared it to be a treaty of victory. Surprised face. Prophet, surely we have granted you a manifest victory, in the shape of a treaty concluded at Hudaybiyah. Surah Al-Fath, 1. Later events proved that the treaty was a blessing in disguise for the Muslims. As a result of the established peace, Islam spread much faster in Arab tribes. The Prophet was able to concentrate more on his preaching activities. As a result, the number of Muslims in Arabia increased manifold. Many prominent members of Quraysh, including Khalid ibn al-Walid and Amr ibn al-As, converted to Islam after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. In the 7th year of migration, the Prophet wrote letters to various rulers of his time to invite them to Islam. Among many others, he wrote letters to Najashi, the ruler of Habsha, Maukawqis, the ruler of Egypt, Kaiser, the ruler of the Roman Empire, and Kisra, the ruler of the Persian Empire. Najashi had already accepted Islam when the Muslim migrants arrived in Habsha. Najashi wrote a letter in reply to the Prophet's letter, in which he declared his belief in Tawheed and Risalat. Muhammad had also asked him to send the Muslim migrants to Medina. The Muslim migrants, including Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, were therefore returned to Medina. Maukawqis was polite in his reply to the letter of Muhammad, but he was hesitant to embrace Islam. Kaiser was convinced in his heart that the message brought by Muhammad was from God. However, he too did not declare his belief in Allah's messenger for the fear of mutiny from his Christian subjects. The king of Persia was the most rude of all in reacting to the letter. He tore the letter into pieces. When Muhammad heard about it, he said that Kisra's empire would also be torn into pieces by Allah, just like he tore the letter. In the 7th year, Allah's messenger also led a campaign to Khayber. Khayber was a very rich city towards the north of Medina. It was mostly inhabited by Jews. The Banu Nadir Jews had also settled in Khayber after their expulsion from Medina. Khayber became a center of conspiracies against the Muslims. It was the Jews of Khayber who had instigated the Quraysh and the Banu Ghatfan to attack Medina in the Battle of Trench. Khayber was a difficult city to conquer. The Jews had spent their wealth in strengthening their city with 8 impregnable fortresses. The Muslims besieged them one by one and ultimately conquered 5 out of the 8 fortresses. The Jews in the last 3 fortresses agreed to surrender to the Muslims. The Prophet too gave them the permission to live in Khayber on the condition that the Jews would give half of their annual yield to the Muslims each year. The conquest of Khayber was instrumental in improving the economic conditions of the Muslims. In the 7th or the 8th year, Allah's messenger sent an army of 3,000 strong to fight the Banu Ghassan tribe in Mautta. The battle was known as the Battle of Mautta. The Banu Ghassan tribe had martyred a messenger of Muhammad, due to which they were to be punished. As the army was departing, Allah's messenger too gave the instructions that the army would be commanded by Zayd ibn Haritha, and if Zayd ibn Haritha was martyred, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib would take the command, and if he was also martyred, then Abdullah ibn Rawaha would take the charge, and if he was also martyred, then the Muslims would select a commander themselves after agreement. When the Muslims reached Mautta, located in present-day Jordan, they encountered a huge army of 200,000. The Banu Ghassan tribe was allied to the Roman Empire, and a large number of Roman soldiers also had joined their ranks. The small force of 3,000 did not hesitate to clash with a far greater army. The outcome of the battle was unfolding exactly as was indicated by the Prophet 22. All 3 commanders, Zayd, Ja'far and Abdullah, were martyred one after the other. Finally, the Muslims chose Khalid ibn al-Walid as their commander. Khalid reorganized his army to attack the Romans with full force. The Muslims fought with great valor, taking the enemy by surprise. The Muslims finally retreated after inflicting heavy losses upon the opponents. The final outcome of the Battle of Mautta was indecisive, with no side gaining absolute dominance. However, the battle did make the Romans realize the courage and determination of the Muslims. The Muslims had conveyed a clear statement of strength and courage to the Romans.